welcome you to the program portion of our meeting, in which we're going to get in depth on some hot forestry topics for warming winters on this cold February day. We'll have 3 different presentations and Q&A sessions. We'll conclude at 2:45. And just before we kick things off, want to bring us back to 2020, just before the pandemic started. Seems like both a lifetime ago and yesterday. We had the Yankee SAF meeting in Tolland, Connecticut, and we were just kicking off a project, looking at ways to increase resiliency in southern New England oak forests. And Amanda Mahaffey is the deputy director, and Logan Johnson, the Northeastern region coordinator of the Forest Stewards Guild, are going to talk with us about what we've learned in that project over the past couple of years, and what's to come over the final year of this project. So glad to have you here today, and Amanda and Logan, you can take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Let me, I'm not going to spotlight myself for the moment. So welcome back, everybody. I think everybody has figured out Zoom, but just as a reminder, if you haven't yet changed your name, make sure that your name is appearing as it really truly should be, not your kid's iPad, so that you can make sure to get SAF credits for today's presentation. So again, ... click on rename, and then make sure that your name appears correctly. Also, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat window. I believe you also have the ability to unmute yourself if you have a question. You can also use the raise hand function. But again, the chat is going to be a good way to go. Someone will be keeping an eye on the chat window at all times. Oh, and there's reactions. So these have gotten more fun if you've updated Zoom. So you can have a little ta-da party, or you can do something more fun like here's some skis, or here's a cat. So I'm going to be asking for you to share some reactions in just a moment. So without further ado, I'd like to dive right in. So Yankee SAF, February 13th, 2020. So my first question is, how many of you were there? So if you were there, please show me a reaction in Zoom. Can be whatever reaction you want. There was at least one person there, 2 with a thumbs up. Somebody was laughing with joy. I know there were more people there because we had at least 85 people reported that we reported MASH on. So yes, lots of you are figuring out. Thank you. And Mark typed into the chat. Thank you. So a lot of you were there. So you remember what it's like to meet in person and eat good food together and have some really good conversations. So it's good to see all of you again. And as Christopher alluded, this is this is where we are now. We've done quite a bit of work building on that Yankee SAF meeting from February of 2020. So on the next note, one of the things that we did was work together in that meeting to define resiliency. So Christopher notated this because his handwriting is better than mine. But thinking about oak resiliency, but resiliency overall, some of these key elements of it, we said as a group, the ability to withstand stressors and still be present and viable, to adapt to changing conditions, being able to respond to change, making sure that the key components of oak forests are still there. And also functional capacity. That's something we'll talk a little bit about. So resiliency has all these elements that we helped define together. We also, on the next slide, talked about some desired positive attributes of oak resiliency. We talked about elements related to ecological and forest health. We also talked about social and economic elements, which I didn't share that slide as well. But just as a reminder, these are some of the things that we, all the folks here, said that we wanted to see in southern New England's oak forests. And we also spent some time on the next slide talking about solutions for increasing oak resiliency. So if you remember, we got to walk around the room together. We had some wonderful volunteers, voluntold volunteers that were manning the flip charts and helping to identify and prioritize strategies that can be taken for increasing oak resiliency. Herbivory management was one that certainly got a lot of attention. Thanks again to Tom Wansleben for helping facilitate that discussion. We also talked about solutions in the themes under the themes of landowner engagement and economics and silviculture, and policy and public opinion and relations, and also messaging for landowners. There were a lot of really great ideas that were generated. Some of them, especially the public messaging piece, really got swept up in the work that Mike Ferrucci led in trying to communicate with the public about the value of forests and managing forests, especially under the changing climate. So on the next slide, a little bit about herbivory management. We'll talk a little bit more about the broader project in a second. But Jeff Ward, besides everything he's done for SAF, has also been working on this project, really working to build and promote slash walls as a tool for managing herbivory. This is oh, yes, thank you, Logan. So there's a link in the chat window to a very cool YouTube video that the Rhode Island Forest Conservators Organization put together to help explain to landowners, what is a slash wall? Why would you want to use it? How do you go about putting one together on your property? So go Rhode Island for leading the way there. And Jeff is also working with folks in Connecticut and Massachusetts to help bring this slash wall concept over to Southern New England. And so, okay, sorry, thank you, Mark. Produced by Rhode Island NRCS. But again, go Rhode Island, and for helping not only put in a slash wall very quickly, but also try to create this, creating this communication tool for landowners to better understand, what does this mean to me as a small private woodland owner? So slash walls are part of what we tried to address. But after February 2020, life gave us some lemons. So when life gives you lemons and you have all these great visions, then make lemonade with your friends. So we have gotten to, over the last couple of years, now we're in February of 2022, we've gotten to work with all of these great partners in different states in Southern New England to try to advance these goals of increasing resiliency in Southern New England's oak forests. And Logan is going to tell you more about what exactly we've been up to.
Thank you, Amanda. So yes, I will cover the broader scope of the Oak Resiliency project in Southern New England here for you. So with support from the United States Department of Agriculture's Forest Service Landscape Scale Restoration Program, we at the Forest Stewards Guild are working with state agencies and nonprofits partners in Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, as noted on the previous slide and referenced by Amanda, to increase resiliency in Southern New England forests. And we're doing this work through collaborative initiatives, including regional professional learning exchanges, landowner stewardship summits, hands-on resiliency assessment workshops, and synthesis and knowledge transfer. Through these, the Guild and partners aim to increase forest stewardship activities that support oak resilience, empower natural resource professionals with tools for assessing oak forest health, build landowner awareness of regeneration challenges and solutions, and foster communication between states and agencies about strategies for addressing oak forest resilience and regeneration challenges. And meetings like this at the Yankee SAF are one example of how we're reaching these goals. So from those goals, we have specific activities that we've outlined. So I'll cover them each in detail, but for an overview, they are workshops for professionals, educational events for landowners, oak resiliency assessment tool development, use, and data collection, and I'll spend some time on that in a little bit, and a regional oak forest resilience synthesis. So how do these activities help increase oak resilience? Focused around the central goal of increasing oak resiliency, we have strategies and tools that serve to reach our central goal. This presentation is an example of how we're engaging foresters in this project. Additionally, we're engaging landowners, and the Oak Resiliency Assessment tool helps feed into the central goal of increasing oak resiliency. On the output and process side of the model here, we will synthesize our findings from throughout the project and continue building a community of people working to increase the resiliency of oak in Southern New England forests. So workshops for professionals. These are designed for natural resource professionals, including foresters, wildlife biologists, and other resource stewards, to discuss methods and strategies for regenerating oak. So far, we've collaborated to deliver workshops and field tours to you, the members of the Yankee division of SAF, and other natural resource professionals throughout Southern New England. We've also hosted events at demonstration areas and field tours. Pictured above is Christopher Riley of Sweet Birch Consulting and Yankee SAF Chair. Christopher is a key contractor and partner on this project, and he's seen here at Norcross Wildlife Sanctuary owned property in Wales, Massachusetts, known as Whaleback Ridge. And you can see him surrounded by a sea of oak regeneration. This workshop was held in conjunction with one of our Oak Resiliency Assessment Tool project workshops. And this second half of the day we spent in the woods talking about oak regeneration and some of the activities that Norcross has been working on to promote oak in their forests. And while we understand the value of these in-person events and field tours, as we all know, the pandemic forced us to adjust some of our events. One example of our pandemic pivot is our webinar and field tour model that we're unleashing here in the Southern New England region now. So we're testing this new type of hybrid event where we host a webinar and field tour combo, where we co-host a two-part series focusing on oak forests at the Quabbin Reservoir with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation's Division of Water Supply Protection and researchers from Harvard Forest and UMass Amherst. First, the webinar provided an overview about the health of oak forests at the Quabbin Reservoir and was open to anyone with no cap on registration. So that was our opportunity to get the information out there and present it in a public way as you would in a field tour, except everybody could tune in from the comfort of their own home or office or wherever they found themselves that day. Exactly 1 week after the webinar, we held a field tour, which was limited to 20 participants who joined the webinar to have a really rich discussion in the field. So this webinar and field tour model allows us to share the key information during the webinar and allows us to focus on open discussion about the topic in the field at specific sites that are highlighted during the webinar. And during this, this field tour that is imaged here, that's Audrey Barker-Plotkin, sharing some of her research studies at the Quabbin Reservoir. And it was a really engaged group of people and so much knowledge there, both people who had previous experience with the Quabbin, people who were just learning about it. So the whole breadth of people participated in this hybrid event. Moving on to the educational events for landowners. Initially, our Landowner Stewardship Summits were supposed to look a lot like this event from February 2020. In-person gatherings of forest landowners and resource professionals on hand to answer their questions of the challenges they face around managing oak forests. A few events like this were held before March 2020, but however, due to the pandemic, again, we had to pivot to virtual programming, which generated some creative event formats. Some of the virtual events we hosted for landowners include communicating with landowners about Oak Resiliency, a webinar that Amanda and Christopher hosted and shared a lot of great information on. Next was a forest management from a landowner's perspective webinar, which featured some landowners discussing their own process for stewarding their forest and how they work with a forester and the decisions-making process that they undergo while making stewardship decisions for their property. In early 2021, we hosted a landowner town hall and follow-up question and answer. The town hall had over 100 participants. And the follow-up Q&A allowed those that had specific questions from the town hall an opportunity to come back into the Zoom room and ask a local expert. During that Q&A, we broke up into states, and so people for specific states could go in with the resource professionals from their states and ask really local questions. We also hosted an oak mini series for forest landowners. The first session focused on wildlife, which is oftentimes the most interested piece of the objectives that landowners have. And that was presented by Brian Hawthorne of Mass Wildlife. Session 2, forestry, was presented by Fern Graves of the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. And Session 3, climate change, was presented on by Andrea Urbano of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So we've had some innovation by necessity created from the pandemic, but we're still able to get out there and provide these workshops for foresters and these educational events for landowners that are still moving right along as planned, just in a different kind of lens. Next, I'm going to take some time to talk about the last of the inputs we'll discuss today in the Oak Resiliency Assessment tool. This tool allows users to consider how resilient oak-dominated forest stands on a property are to climate change and various stressors. Working with the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative at the University of Vermont and the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, we've developed an Oak Resiliency Assessment tool. While using the tool, users rate the degree to which certain impacts affect the forest and the adaptive capacity of the forest to respond to these impacts. Based on the impacts and adaptive capacity ratings, the tool generates a report and an overall vulnerability score of low, medium, or high. Additionally, the reports include detailed description of issues of concern, resistance, resilience, and transition pathways to help guide landowners and managers in their decision-making process. To get the tool in the user's hands and train them on how to use it, we are hosting workshops geared for both foresters and landowners. We've held a couple of these workshops to date and are planning more for 2022. So how does the tool work? First, you'll answer a series of questions about how you're using the tool, whether you're testing it out just from your office or you're live on site, or you can do a live run from your office as well if you have the necessary information. You'll also indicate whether you're a forester or a landowner. And then provide information on the site you're assessing, such as the amount of acres it covers and a quick description of the site and where it is geographically on a map. Then you'll move right into the assessment, which really consists of two key components that help us better understand the overall vulnerability of a site. The first on the left is the potential impacts of climate change and other disturbances on the site. For impacts, we're looking at both imminent and future threats to the health and function of the forest. On the other side of the equation is the adaptive capacity of the site. Here, we are thinking about the ability of the site to cope with change. Another way to think about this is as the resilience of the system, or will that system be able to respond or bounce back if and when it experiences certain impacts? Weighing these considerations together, we get a better idea of the level of vulnerability of a particular stand. Once you complete the assessment, the tool generates a report that includes the overall site vulnerability, site range, and issues of concern, along with the site image you uploaded. Here, you will also be able to download the PDF report generated from your responses. The site vulnerability and site range is the result of the equation on the previous slide, where the overall rating given to the potential impacts and adaptive capacity are combined in the matrix to give you an overall site vulnerability. Then the site range is available for you to see where you chart on the matrix and how far the stand is to the next vulnerability score. So for instance, if there was 2 less on impacts, the overall rating of impacts on this that you see here was 2, you'd move into that low vulnerability range. But if the impacts were more disruptive, then you'd move into that higher vulnerability range. As seen here. And then the issues of concern links are generated based on responses to individual impacts and adaptive capacity ratings. In the example on the screen, invasive species, herbivory, and pests and pathogens were identified as likely impacts. So the tool provides the users with additional resources to explore and learn more about how these impacts affect their forest. Some of the impacts that we look at are increase in extreme precipitation events, in storm frequency and intensity, elevated drought risk or risk of wildfire, invasive plants, insects, pests, and forest pathogens, deer herbivory, reduced habitat for some northern tree species, sea level, and damage to forest roads and trails. Further down the results page, you will see a range of adaptation pathways presented, including resistance, resilience, transition, and no action. If you click on any of these, you'll access another interactive page with a conceptual description of that pathway, along with a table of potential adaptation actions based on the site condition descriptions. These example adaptation actions are largely based off a resource created by the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, or NIACS, called adaptation menus, which are a culmination of extensive review of the scientific literature, as well as the synthesis of ideas and experience provided by land managers. There is some guidance when you expand each of these pathways on whether or not it's the right pathway for you. For instance, if you receive a low vulnerability, it may be relatively easy to maintain the current forest condition by leaving things as is, or implementing measures to resist disturbance and change. Alternatively, if you have a moderate or high vulnerability, The resistance pathway actions are less likely feasible and more challenging in some of the approaches in the resilience or transition pathways may be better for this site. It's important to note that the content in these adaptation pathways should not be considered recommendations or prescriptions. Rather, they are options for you to consider when making decisions within your specific site context. Since there really is no one-size-fits-all strategy that works for everyone on the ground, we can't be prescriptive in how we give off these recommendations. Lastly, as I mentioned, all of this information from the results page, including the issues of concern pages and the various adaptation pathways, are bundled into a downloadable PDF report. This report can inform or amend management plans or be used for reference with partners and landowners as needed. So looking to the future, as we promote this unique tool for assessing the resiliency of oak forests in southern New England, here's why we think the tool has value for you and the forests in the region. First, as foresters, we want to save you time and energy and provide efficient solutions for your work. We envision you being able to use this tool while meeting with a new landowner to conduct a rapid assessment of their forest. Additionally, the tool provides a great opportunity for you to communicate with landowners about what you are noticing on their property while you're walking it with them for the first time. Then the PDF report is a simple and effective forest management plan amendment that can be revisited by you or the landowner at any point you need to. Second, we want to assess the resiliency of oak forests across the southern New England landscape. The data collected by the tool users will contribute to a stronger spatial understanding of oak vulnerability throughout the region. And by collecting these data points and compiling them spatially, we can identify areas with high vulnerability. So we're really excited about getting this tool out there to you. If you're interested in a workshop, please let me know. There is a workshop on YouTube for you to view at this time. A lot of what's been listed in this segment of the presentation is also part of the workshop, and then there's a tutorial on the website. So if you want to start getting some use with the tool, we encourage you to do that. So moving on into the output portion of this project is the synthesis and continued community building. The synthesis activities for the Oak Resiliency project is ongoing. And in 2022, as we look back at the entire 3-year project, we'll compile key findings to help continue the momentum developed from this grant. One place that you can look for all of the resources developed during this project and additional ones that provide value are on the Forest Stewards Guild website, foreststewardsguild.org/oak-resiliency. And I hope Amanda puts that in the chat for me. On this webpage, you can find our Oak Resiliency Toolkit, and in the toolkit, we have outreach materials designed for forest landowners, communication resources for foresters, silvicultural and field tools, wildlife resources, and research for understanding how oaks grow. We also have 2 print publications that we're currently working on. One is a question and answers document that we developed from that Q&A that we had following the landowner town hall. From the landowner town hall and Q&A, we brought out the kind of key questions that the landowners had and had our partners craft well-crafted responses and put them in this print publication that we will get out there in the coming months. The other one, wildlife considerations in assessing oak forest resiliency, was developed between Leonora Pepper of the Forest Stewards Guild and Brian Hawthorne of Mass Wildlife to use similarly to the Oak Resiliency Assessment tool, considering the wildlife aspects of the oak forest stand. So before I close, I just want to mention some ways where you can get involved with the project, whether a landowner, forester, or other natural resource professional, or just interested public. There's a way for anyone to get involved with this project. I know we're all foresters, but if you're talking with forest landowners and they don't know where to start, a local service forester is the best bet. A great place to start for you as foresters is by visiting the Oak Resiliency webpage that Amanda shared in the chat and explore the resources in the toolkit that we've put together there. Additionally, you can join an Oak Resiliency Assessment Tool workshop and use the tool to help us collect data on oak resiliency throughout the region. Again, as I mentioned, if you don't want to wait for a workshop, you can start using the tool right now. After viewing a tutorial on the website's homepage, you should be good to go. It's pretty intuitive and designed by foresters for foresters, so you should have no problem getting started using the tool. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to assist. Lastly, keep a lookout for Oak Resiliency focused events. When we schedule an event, we'll advertise through many of our partner channels throughout Southern New England, so it should come across your desk at some point. And we're happy to answer any questions, and you can stay connected with us by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or following our website, signing up to become a member. Our newsletters often have events in them. So we really want to engage with you on this project, and these are some of the ways where we can help. But I'll now stop sharing my screen and open it up to questions, or if Amanda wants to add any comments that she thought about while I was speaking.
I'll just add that that's some good lemonade. You know, this is the way the world is, but we've been able to do quite a bit with this project in spite of the recent challenges. We've, really relished every opportunity we've had to be in the field with other folks and just keep these conversations going. And for me, one of the big highlights of working on this project has been getting to have folks in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island talk with each other and share resources, share ideas, share information, share landowner outreach strategies. Use the Oak Resiliency Assessment tool. So there's always a lot more work to be done, but we're excited by what we've been able to accomplish despite the curveballs that have been thrown our way. We're happy to take any questions that folks have.
Thanks so much, Amanda and Logan. It's really interesting to have the opportunity to revisit this project, see how things evolved and the unanticipated path over the past couple of years and some of the products that are coming out of it. And, with all of the forestry expertise that's participating in the meeting today, do welcome questions, comments, and have some time for that.
And if you do use that Oak Resiliency Assessment tool, I promise you it's fun. But try to let us know if you have questions about the tool, about how it's working, about information that you got or didn't get that you were hoping to get. But the more info we have regionally, the more FEMC can help us display, like, what's the regional picture of Oak Resiliency look like? So that's another motivation for getting more data into the tool.
Question to throw out, but if participants are interested in upcoming events or the things that may be happening over the coming months, what's the best way for them to keep abreast of that, or to learn about what may be happening in their state and how to join in?
Thanks, Christopher. The best way is to get on the Forest Stewards Guild Across the Landscape newsletter. We're always publishing events that are happening in the region, whether it's Oak Resiliency or climate change focused, whatever it may be. There's often events in there that would be relevant to you. Second, we interact with our partners all the time. Anytime we have an event set in stone, we email it out to just about everyone we can to make sure that it gets through all the different communication channels that there are in the Southern New England region and beyond. Lastly, we do post on social media about our events, so that's another way to follow us. Those are typically more live. They'll come a little bit closer to the event, but they're a great way to see what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Thanks. So following up on that, we have a somewhat more specific question from Lincoln Fish, who's wondering if we have landowner outreach events on resiliency. They're scheduled for this spring or summer.
That's a great question, Lincoln. We don't have anything that's specific, kind of broad landowner outreach events on the calendar yet. However, what I will say is Christopher and I will be giving a Oak Resiliency Assessment Tool workshop to the Connecticut Master Woodland Manager Program on April 30th, which is a Saturday at the very last day of April. And so Christopher and I are looking forward to engaging with those really already highly engaged landowners. The tool is really designed for foresters, but we think that the kind of really engaged landowner can use it to effectively, considering these folks are oftentimes really connected to their landscape and know a lot of the jargon that the tool has encompassed within it.
I think that feeds into Tim Hawley's question. Does the tool help communicate with people interested in public land management, i.e. not landowners? So just following up on what Logan said, some of the verbiage is a little technical, but we tried to keep it accessible at the same time. So hopefully if this is a public that's interested in science behind why we manage forests, then yes, this would be a good tool and a good way to explain some of that. You can run through the assessment of a property that might be of interest to folks in public land management. You can also go straight to the resources on the page. I think I listed or linked to that earlier, but there's resources for foresters and landowners, plenty of links, science-based links there. There's also the issues of concern if there's contention or questions about a specific issue. And then there's also links to the pathways and other information. So we're trying to keep it well grounded across a broad base of existing scientific resources.
And I just threw into the chat a recording of the January 19th tool workshop that we held. You won't be able to see any of the breakout room discussions or the kind of work on your own time that we had during that, but between the workshop recording, the tutorial, we really hope that the tool is easy enough for you to use without needing the workshop. But at the same time, we do like hosting workshops. Amanda, Christopher, and I think all three of us really enjoy hosting workshops and getting out there with you. So if you're looking for a more enriching experience, we hope to see you at one of those.
One more question out there. I think this is evolving, but how do you think that the lessons that are being learned from this project and some of the tools, might ultimately be useful in some other regions of New England or even beyond?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much, but some of you may have participated in the Regeneration Roundtable led by Hubbard Brook. About a year ago. And then there was a follow-up conversation hosted at the Forest Ecosystem Monitoring Cooperative, specifically on the topic of herbivory. So this is an issue that clearly still needs to be addressed. And so I'm working with FEMC and with Hubbard Brook to try to design some kind of a event or series of events, hopefully field and then combined, maybe doing field tours in a few different states and then combining that with a webinar or just like kind of a virtual gathering of folks after we do the field tours to get folks on the same page about what are the regeneration needs and issues specifically as impacted by herbivory. And what can we do collectively to try to address that? And again, there was a lot of really good info collected from all of you from the Yankee SAF 2020 meeting. And the world's changed a little bit since then, but I think the need was very, very clearly identified. Hopefully we'll have even more info from Jeff, who's been doing all the slash walls research and helping to help paint that clear picture of why should we manage the element of herbivory in oak forests and how do we get benefits from it?
Thanks, Amanda. Got a question from Eric Hansen here about the Oak Resiliency Assessment tool specifically. He's asking, is it designed to help inform the Forest Stewards Guild to be able to internally help fine-tune messaging, if I understand that correctly, or is it designed to give feedback for people who will fill out the information about the relative resiliency of their oak forest?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. I think the latter, in providing feedback or information about the relative resiliency of their oak forest, that's what we really want to provide. We want to provide a snapshot of that forest, that stand, that site, whatever scale that they're working on. We just want to provide a snapshot to get them to consider those issues of consideration, how vulnerable it is, and some of the pathways. And those are all kind of set in stone at this point. In terms of tools designed to help inform guild messaging and internal information to fine tune that messaging, any interaction we have with anybody, whether it be foresters, landowners, natural resource stewards that work for land trusts, every one of these audiences and even the individuals within the audiences have their own perspective on the issue. And so fine-tuning messaging can be really, really challenging thing to do. But if we highlight these broader themes that are highlighted throughout the tool, that's where we see the value. We have the messaging in the tool, but things like the Q&A document that we put out there, those were kind of the high level questions that we were hearing, and we want to address those. So from the workshops, we get questions like that, and that can inform future publications and things like that.
Thanks, Logan. And to give anyone else an opportunity to ask questions or make any comments while we still have Amanda and Logan here for the Q&A.
I might suggest, since some folks have been in this meeting for a while, if you want to take a very quick 5-minute break, that might give Alec and Jennifer a chance to get set up, and Logan and I can stick around and answer questions out louder in the chat while that's going on. But I would encourage everybody out there to take a break from your computer, get up, go outside, stretch so that you're fresh and ready to pay attention to the next 2 presentations, because they're going to be really good.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Amanda. We will do that. Thanks so much to the both of you. It's inspiring to hear, how much we've learned over the past couple of years, and what you've done in making lemonade out of lemons. So let's take a break, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. And Amanda and Logan, I believe, are available to talk in the meantime.
Yeah, Andrew. I don't know much about this oak silva. Can you unmute and tell me a little bit more about it?
Logan, I believe that he is speaking about a software program that's developed by the Forest Service that's most commonly used in the Pennsylvania and the Allegheny region for assessing, where things are with forest regeneration, where you should be or need to be. But I couldn't speak to it more specifically than that. I know that the tool can't directly be paired with silva, but perhaps there are opportunities for using them in a complementary fashion.
I can speak just really quickly on that. The Oak Silva tool was originally developed for Pennsylvania and the Mid-Atlantic states. But if you look where it covers, it actually goes into at least southern New England. There will be the latest version, it'll probably be the last update, will be coming out sometime this summer. Pat Brose is rewriting it with some other folks in the Forest Service. I just got done reading the next to the last version of it and making some suggestions on it. But it's a flow chart. It's a way of assessing your stand, and then there's a flow chart, a decision chart, which gives you an idea just maybe to think outside what you usually think about, and then to develop your prescription. So it's considered an aid to developing a prescription. It's not a cookie cutter recipe that you have to follow.
A question here from Peter Tucker, who asks if the tool pertains also to northern hardwood transition stands with oak components.
I would say it can. So when we say, oak forests, that can mean forests that have oak in them, or forests in which oak is a strong component. We want to celebrate oak. We want landowners to appreciate and manage for oak, oak resiliency over the long term. But that said, of course, there are northern hardwood transitional stands that have an oak component. So the tool is really a way of framing your thinking. It's a way of thinking about what does resiliency look like. And so I would say, Peter, I'd say give it a try, because I think you'll find enough good information there. And again, it's not a one size fits all tool. It's not going to tell you like this is the one way to get this thing done, but it'll give you a framework for thinking thinking about how resilient is this forest, how serious are the issues of herbivory and the issues of invasive plants and the issues of other forest health challenges in this forest stand. So some of those are more oak specific, but clearly northern hardwoods have their own issues. Not so secretly, the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science was hoping to use this Oak Resiliency Assessment tool as potentially a pilot for developing similar tools for other regions with more of a climate focus, but resiliency and climate adaptation certainly go hand in hand. So I would say give it a try in the northern hardwoods transition stands with oak components, and let us know how it goes.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And on that note, I think we'll conclude on the Oak Resiliency Project while Amanda and Logan are available to follow up offline, answer further questions about it.